Today is 9/11. 22 years ago today, about 3,000 people died at the World Trade Center, the Pentagon, and in Shanksville, Pennsylvania. We're turning now to look at what is sometimes called the other 9/11. 50 years ago today, September 11th, 1973, a U.S.-backed coup led by General Augusto Pinochet ousted Chile's President Salvador Allende, a democratic socialist who'd been elected just 3 years earlier. Allende died in the palace on that day. Under the Pinochet military dictatorship, which lasted until 1990, more than 3,000 people were disappeared or killed, some 40,000 tortured as political prisoners. Chile's current president, Gabriel Boric, commemorated the 1973 coup Sunday with a ceremony in Santiago along with Mexico's President AMLO, Andrés Manuel López Obrador, who he thanked for the country's historic solidarity with the Chilean people. Both called for strengthening democracy in Latin America. Can we talk about the U.S. role, which was so significant? 50 years after Allende's electoral win in 1970, the National Security Archive released a series of documents showing why and how President Nixon and his National Security Advisor, Henry Kissinger, who just turned 100, sought first to prevent Allende from being inaugurated and later to oust him from the presidency. In a secret briefing paper on October 18, 1970, just weeks before Allende was to take office, Kissinger wrote, quote, "Our capacity to engineer Allende's overthrow quickly has been demonstrated to be sharply limited. The question, therefore, is whether we can take action, create pressures, exploit weaknesses, magnify obstacles, which at a minimum will either ensure his failure or force him to modify his policies at a maximum, might lead to situations where his collapse or overthrow later may be more feasible," he wrote. 2 days after his inauguration in Santiago, Kissinger wrote, quote, "The election of Allende as president of Chile poses for us one of the most serious challenges ever faced in this hemisphere." If you, Ariel Dorfman, can talk about the role of the United States, as Kissinger continually threatened, and clearly, though he doesn't write specifically about this in his books, now that the documents are out, shows how he fought to engineer this coup, at least to support it wholeheartedly.
Well, Kissinger is a war criminal. We all know that. And it's shameful how he is being lionized constantly by the press and the bipartisan press in that sense. You know, Kissinger was right. He was right in the following sense. Allende was setting an example because the guerrillas in Latin America had basically failed. The urban guerrillas of the Tupamaros in Uruguay, or the guerrillas that were fighting in the jungles of Colombia or Guatemala. That was not the way which would go forward for Latin America, as it's been proven now, right, where we have a series of left-wing governments who have won the ballot box. And he understood very clearly that Allende was more of a threat than Cuba was to him. Because Cuba could be, the Cuban example could be suppressed with military aid or with counterinsurgencies. How do you do a counterinsurgency against a people who are armed with the vote, who are armed with their consciousness, who are armed with their desire for liberation and love for one another and solidarity? And so he understood that he had to destroy Allende, because if Allende's example would have spread through Latin America, then U.S. interests would have been terribly, compromised.